And thank you for joining us. I think this is our fourth or fifth Lunchtime Live in the Leeds by Example kind of series. And I'm really pleased to say we're joined today by Holly from North Star Coffee Roasters. So Holly, welcome. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get into kind of a chat on various things with Holly over the next kind of 15 to 20 minutes. And just a reminder that, as you may have spotted, this is live. And one of the good things about it is that you can put questions kind of to us. So if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask kind of Holly as we're going along, please do kind of put them in the comments on Facebook and YouTube. And as we're flipping between the two today, if we don't answer them during and just to remind just bear with me for a moment. So so as I say, a bit of background. Leeds by Example, a project that hopefully quite a few people will be aware of, that it started looking at how we can encourage more people to recycle on the go in Leeds city centre. And you may have seen orange and yellow bins in the city centre. And then we've expanded the project over the last 6 to 12 months to look more broadly at sustainability issues. And what we've done, like with a lot of people, we've had to kind of move a lot of stuff online, and we've been doing a series of conversations with people in the city who, from different angles, are looking at sustainability issues. And Holly is someone who we've known for a while, and her business, and we just thought there's some really interesting stuff kind of that they've been doing there for the last few years. So we thought we'd have a chat with Holly. So Holly, if you wouldn't mind starting just letting people know a bit of background to you and your business.
Course, yeah. So hi everyone, I'm Hols, and for those of you that don't know anything about North Star Coffee Roasters, we are a wholesale coffee roastery primarily. We're based in Leeds. We were the first coffee roastery to set up in 2013, and we very much kind of started the business really from the perspective of trying to create a supply chain with a bit more humanity in it for something that had become very commoditized, which was coffee, which is the second most valued commodity in the world after oil. So something that had just, really exploded into a huge industry, had become quite faceless, quite untransparent, and we really had an aim as a business to try and change that really, and to put a face to the person that grows your coffee that you drink every morning to wake up. And yeah, that's kind of how we got into it really. We sort of came into coffee from a sustainability perspective, very much focused on the producers and understanding how we can increase their agency within the supply chain. So my dissertation at university was on fair trade coffee. Sorry, the dog's just woken up.
Hello.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, what's the dog's name?
Yeah, she's called Kanga.
Okay.
Anyway, so my dissertation was on fair trade, and I started looking at the kind of social and economic impact for producers who were participating within fair trade relationships, specifically with coffee. So my kind of studies took me to Kenya, and we spent some time on the ground there just interviewing farmers about how their lives have changed for better or worse for being involved with fair trade. And that kind of really formed the foundation of North Star really. We're not a fair trade business, we're more of a direct trade business. So we kind of we operate outside most of the major procurement mechanisms within coffee, and kind of do things ourselves, so that we maintain those relationships that we have with producers across the world, and very, very directly. We visit them, we speak to them on WhatsApp and Zoom increasingly more than ever now. And yeah, so we essentially work really hard to source their amazing coffee. We bring it into the UK where we roast it in the unit you can see behind me here in Armley, and we supply a variety of businesses across the UK, along with having our own coffee shop at Leeds Dock.
Right, fantastic. Yeah, and how long have you been going?
We've been going for 7 years now. We started in 2013, and yeah, it's kind of just grown from there really. We didn't start from this unit. We've moved quite a few times, to somewhere that's a bit more appropriate, but yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So you've got the coffee shop in Leeds Dock, and then you sell your beans kind of wholesale to other coffee shops and to the public as well.
That's exactly what we do, yeah. So we have our own website that you can buy the coffee from us directly from, which has been really popular through lockdown, thankfully, whilst lots of our wholesale customers have been closed. And we can also get our own shop at Leeds Dock.
Yeah, fantastic. Because I was going to ask you the obvious question about the last 6 months. I mean, I, I imagine it can't have been easy at all. But has that mix of different parts of your business helped to some extent?
Yeah, I mean, we've always been wholesale first. You know, that's the
Mm.
base of our business. Just one moment, I'll just let her
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Oh,
There goes the dog.
sorry. It's
That's
just
all right.
so we were primarily a wholesale business for 4 years before we set up the coffee shop in 2017. But the backbone to our business, really, which really helps us meet our aims as a business, is our wholesale coffee supply. So that's really kind of what we're all about as a roastery, is supplying kind of the coffee that we source in volume to, you know, hospitality businesses across the UK. So obviously when the 23rd of March rolled around and lockdown kind of was enforced, overnight really we had a situation where our entire customer base just closed.
Yeah.
And really with very little notice. I think as we all knew, it kind of, things progressed and happened quite quickly. You know, we couldn't really see what was going to happen or what was to come. So it really massively sort of floored us, if I'm being honest. You know, it was
Yeah.
a really stark realization that, you know, everything we'd worked for like for 7 years could just be taken away like that. And so it was a super scary time, but we've been incredibly fortunate that the last few years we've kind of invested a little bit into our website and sort of forge those relationships more directly with the final consumer at home.
Mm.
We've just had a newfound kind of gratitude and appreciation for those people that buy even 250 grams from us a month or something for them to have in a cafetiere at home. You know, every single baby we sell has counted and really kept us going.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Well, as one of your new kind of customers at home, I can very much vouch for the quality of their coffee. And it's, but I mean, that, as you say, I mean, it must have been really difficult, but at least having those different parts to your business does allow some. Yeah, I'm glad it's kind of helped you to continue. I'd be keen to come back to that theme about the relationships with the coffee producers kind of later on in the discussion, but I thought we'd start kind of chatting about waste, because I think that was the first thing we kind of spoke about 2 or 3 years ago. And I know that it's something that you work really hard at, you know, particularly in the coffee shop, around kind of waste reduction. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about some of the things that you do there on that theme?
Yeah, absolutely. So coffee as an industry is quite difficult for us to be, you know, sort of responsible with regards to kind of carbon emissions, because we are always going to have to source a raw product from many thousands of miles away, because unfortunately it's never going to grow here in the UK unless climate change really hit hard and we suddenly had a tropical environment here in the UK.
And we are in trouble. Yeah.
As a business, we've kind of, you know, from day one, we've always been interested to understand how we can minimize our kind of carbon footprint and the waste that we generate from being a business. We always want to ensure the environmental impact we are having is as positive as it possibly can be. So when it kind of came to setting up our own coffee shop, obviously it was around the time that there'd just been a programme with Hugh for New Whittingstall, which was the war on waste, and it really shone a spotlight on the massive impact that single-use cups were having on the kind of UK's waste footprint. You know, 2 billion a minute or something. It was just absolutely shocking, and it really kind of just made us think very seriously about how we could try and make that space as responsible as possible with the kind of natural waste that we were going to be creating. So we kind of really considered everything, to be honest. There's a really popular kind of brand within the coffee industry called Vegware, which is producing compostable cups. Now, at the time, when we first started the business, we were actually a little bit unsure about whether to go down that route, because the commercial composting option just wasn't available to us. So we weren't able to close that loop, and we were kind of faced with a situation where plastic cups might actually be better because they could be recycled, whereas compostable cups were just ending up in landfill. So we kind of looked really, really intently into that, and that's how we kind of obviously became, you know, to sort of speak to you and to Jill. and talk about how, initiatives that we could look at to try and reduce the use of single use, and at least make, close that loop. And thankfully, kind of a year or so after that conversation, Vegware did actually, sign up with Forge locally, Forge Recycling, allowing us to close that loop on their cups. So that's something that we've implemented in our own space. All of the coffee cups that are kind of brought back to us in store or consumed off site and kind of collected in a separate bin, they're all recycled with our own food waste collections, along with the coffee grounds, the spent grounds that we use on the machine.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Food waste, basically, so we know it's being composted and kind of getting back to where it needs to get to with across agriculture, in the West Yorkshire region.
Yeah.
That kind of doesn't just go for coffee cups, but also all of the sandwich boxes, cake boxes, everything that we do is made from Vegware. So any form of disposable packaging that the coffee shop uses, it can be now composted responsibly. That was one kind of key area. We also obviously looked at things like our energy supplier. We use renewable energy at the coffee shop, having switched the supply. We looked at our menu design. We kind of, I think as a new start coffee shop, there's a temptation to kind of have a really vast menu to try and please everybody, every dietary requirement, and to keep changing things all the time. And I think we sort of took a slightly different approach, and we actually designed the whole menu based on what would create the least waste, which is financially important for a new start coffee shop, but also from the perspective of not generating so much food waste, which is incredibly difficult when you also have such a focus on quality as we do. We want the food and the cake and the kind of baked items to be just as good as the coffee in the coffee shop. So has to be used within the day that it's made, so the opportunity for waste could be huge, but we managed to kind of keep that down from just clever menu planning and making sure our selections were fairly tight until we worked out what people wanted anyway.
Yeah, no, that's good, because I mean, I think those two aspects are really interesting, aren't they? So as you say, there's some of the waste that's created in terms of disposables and takeaways and that kind of thing, that you've tried to find a way to at least kind of close that loop. But I think the design element is really interesting as well, in terms of how you can design your menu. I mean, I remember you writing something about kind of why avocados aren't on your menu. Is that right? Is that still the case? Yeah,
it is. And that was like, that kind of was a decision that we made, and we knew it would upset a few people who'd already been into the shop, but we didn't quite understand how massive the reaction would be to that. Essentially what happened was we opened the shop, and like a lot of coffee shops, the dream menu item that you can have is avocado on toast. It's a dream because it's literally minimal prep. You don't need fridge space, you don't need hob space, you know, easy to prep and serve. It's impressive, it's kind of got that healthy connotation, it's vegan, these boxes that you need to as a coffee shop. And we inevitably started with that on our menu, and after around maybe 3 or 4 weeks of having it on the menu, we were kind of aware of how many, first of all, we would get a crate of 18 avocados, that we'd order in for a weekend service or something. And we were becoming aware of like the fact that up to 50% of them were arriving with us bruised, overripe and kind of really mushy, which when you kind of want the aesthetic impact of serving a really beautiful green, perfectly ripe avocado for the Instagram lovers and people who really care about that kind of thing, that just wasn't working. But secondly, we kind of looked into it and realized how incredibly kind of detrimental that trend for the consumption of avocados has become. That in the UK we're relying on kind of areas of the world that are, again, thousands of miles away from where we are here, that are literally pumping 1,000 litres of water to growing one avocado. So the actual process of manufacturing avocados is incredibly incredibly impactful negatively with regards to water consumption and space cleared for avocado planting. But then you also have the transport, you know, and the kind of need to export in a way that keeps the avocado unripe, you know, that preserves it during shipment, so it's refrigerated or
another impact. Yeah.
And then when it lands in the UK, it would be, you know, sort of the opposite of heat would be applied or whatever to bring up that ripening process and make that happen perfect. So we kind of just had a situation where the coffee that we were serving, obviously we knew the transparency behind that, because we take ownership over that side of things. The tea we were sourcing, you know, was organic and very ethical. Every other menu item, you know, the meat, the dairy that we were using was we could tick all of these like procurement boxes that we put in place, other than the avocado on toast, and so we just kind of couldn't kind of quite reconcile that with ourselves, you know, when we want to try and do things as ethically as we can, and in a way that's as responsible as we can. So it had to go off the menu, you know. We just off, and I had to write kind of an article about it, just because I thought people should know, you know. I love avocado, like it's so you know, I really enjoy it, but I think people really need to be aware of you know, how detrimental they can be, and it's the reason we also serve oat milk as a dairy alternative within our coffee shop. That's kind of our preferred option, as opposed to things like soy, which is also again detrimental to the environment. So
interesting.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a really interesting story, and as you say, you've engaged quite a lot of us in, you know, when I hadn't thought particularly about the issues around, you know, that kind of, you know, avocados, particularly in terms of produce. But I'm kind of interested in this kind of global theme, really, in terms of I think the other thing that's really interesting in your business is that you clearly put a lot of effort into having really kind of strong, close, long-term relationships with your coffee farmers. I mean, did that develop through the study that you did at university, your dissertation and things?
Yeah, so I mean, it really kind of came, the whole business, we started the business nearly fresh out of university, so we kind of came into it, we never ever said to ourselves we want to have our own business or we want to be entrepreneurs or anything like that. We kind of were just 22, and we didn't have a mortgage, and we kind of just thought, why not? We really wanted to kind of contribute to coffee improving in our hometown, and could see that there just wasn't the resource required, you know, for that to happen. So North Star has become a kind of a coffee company based in Yorkshire that's had such a huge involvement in so many of the shops that we now know and love, that have been kicking around for the past kind of, you know, 3, 4, 5 years. I really kind of feel proud that we've played a role in transforming the kind of scene, you know, within Leeds, because before we were kind of here, there was 1 or 2 great shops doing a really good job, but definitely sourcing from London, and everybody else was kind of looking at going to Costco, you know, or the Vatsa, you know, and kind of using was really sort of was roasted, you know, 18 months previously, you know, wasn't great quality. And the thing is about quality, the reason it's so important to us is because we can't expect people to care about where their coffee comes from unless they take that sip and they go, wow, why does that taste so much better than what I've had elsewhere? When we set the business up, you know, we did so basically, we had the luxury of being able to say, well, in our mind, you know, what does a great business look like? You know, and for us, having grown up in the era we did, you know, and looked at things like climate change and sustainability in school and at university, you know, it felt like the absolute only way to go about things was to build those principles into the blueprint of the business, so that every decision we've made and every manner in which we've grown has always come back to our key principles, which have been quality and ethics. So yeah, we absolutely had it built into the business plan from day one, that, you know, success to us not only is measured on the kind of bottom line of the, you know, profit and loss sheet, but it's also the impact that we have on people and planet is a kind of triple led impact. So that's kind of, that absolutely like is the thing that, in all honesty, Rob, it keeps us going in times like we've experienced the past 6 months, where
I bet,
really, really hard and super stressful. And you do sometimes think, oh, I could go and do this and, you know, not have this burden on our shoulders. But it's the kind of wider involvement that we have in a global supply chain, you know, and the responsibilities that we have to the people that we work with, you know, to source that product from, that really does.
No, that's really interesting. And I mean, this is quite a big question, but I mean, obviously, perhaps more than ever, we've become focused on how things are for each of us over the last 6 months. It's been a really difficult time, but I mean, how have things been for your coffee farmers that you're working with?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think a lot of people perhaps wouldn't have even thought about, yeah, much beyond that local kind of community, which is understandable. It has been, yeah, there's been enough, you know, more locally to keep us all
Yeah,
concerned
yeah.
and focused on. For us, way back in March, I'm not joking, my first thought went to the contracts that we've already made with producers, i.e. the coffee that we've already had to commit to purchasing, you know, 9 months ahead of when we'll sell it, and the impact it will have on us using that coffee, and the knock-on impact that will have on our ability to buy from the next harvest. So that we kind of run our business very seasonally. We buy from harvest to harvest, and I have to somehow every year look at how much of that particular origin we sold the previous year, how much we're anticipating on selling this year, based on volumes roughly staying the same, maybe accounting for a little bit of growth. And that's how we have to buy the coffee. We have to put the money up basically a long time before it sells. And you know, obviously with what's happened with the lockdown, we have literally, we're kind of like 70% down, you know, on the volumes that we would be doing. So we've really been in a tight spot, and understandably, as a result, we had producers that we were working with who were going through the harvest at that time in the year. So right away from kind of March to June, and who not only were having to face things like social distancing, PPE, curfews, you know, all of those things themselves, but we're doing so without any government support, no furlough schemes, no grant, nothing like that. We're, you know, facing a situation where the healthcare kind of provision just wasn't good enough at all. And also had to face the huge worry that they wouldn't actually be able to recoup the costs they would spend on the harvest, because they would lose sales through businesses like ours. So we had lots and lots of conversations right early on in lockdown, where we were having to try and get our heads around what the impact would be. We were doing a lot of reassuring, you know, and understanding how we could continue to meet those kind of obligations that we had for, you know, for maintaining those relationships. So we actually felt so compelled to do something. We sort of set up a GoFundMe campaign for our producers that we work with in Kenya, who were specifically having things like curfews put in place, which meant that when the coffee harvest happens, it's very much like wine or olives or you know, some similar harvests in Europe, where you have migratory workforces that travel and everyone helps out with picking coffee, and it's a really hands-on process. It's incredibly time sensitive. You have to pick it when it's just right, otherwise you know, you've lost all that potential quality in the cup. And with social distancing enforced, it meant you could only have one picker per tree, as opposed to maybe three or four.
Okay. Yeah.
That was impacting the yield of what could be collected. Then there were 5 p.m. curfews put in place, and that really impacts coffee processing, which happens on an evening usually. So the cherries are collected through the day, then they're delivered to a wet mill, and the wet mill happens all the way through the night. Again, very time sensitive, because if you leave those cherries intact for too long, they'll over ferment, you know, they'll develop mold, they basically become unsellable. So yields were kind of looking down about 40%, just because they physically couldn't get the coffee in. And things like loans were being defaulted. So coffee growers actually have to go to a lender to get money to afford to get themselves through the harvest, which they then pay back that loan once. They have to pay for the cost of inputs, you know, way ahead of when the coffee's sold, the fertilizer, the labor, and all of that kind of thing. And lots of lenders were just, you know, completely defaulting loans. So farmers were literally in a situation where they were watching their money, you know, their income die on the tree. You know, it's as simple as that. And I'm not just talking, you know, for us, perhaps perhaps we just will write this year off, you know, but we're not looking at issues of, you know, food supply.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, the most basic supplies. So yeah,
Yeah.
we basically set up a GoFundMe campaign to try and sort of raise around £5,000 because we know exactly where the money's going, and
Mm.
felt really confident that it was just felt like the right thing to do. It really,
Yeah,
really.
yeah. No, that's good. Is that still live, the GoFundMe?
It is
Yeah.
live, actually. Yeah, it is. So I think you can find us under something like support for coffee producers in Kenya throughout.
Yeah. Well, we'll make sure we find it and share it after below this post. I mean, I could talk all afternoon, do you know what I mean, in terms of or listen in terms of the
Yeah,
things you've got to say, but I'm conscious of your time as well. But kind of one final thing I wanted to chat to you about was about um, what your customers think about all of this. Because I think one thing that strikes me about your business is that in one sense you're very upfront about kind of sustainability and things, but in other ways I could just go to your coffee shop in Leeds Dock, have a really nice coffee and food, and not necessarily, be kind of hit in the face with the fact that sustainability really matters to you. And I'm just interested in if there's how much you think about that, about reaching just your everyday customer with what are quite important messages, but often messages that can be a little bit kind of dull in the way that a lot of people communicate them. Do you see what I'm getting at with the question?
yes, absolutely. And it's a challenge we face all the time. I think if I could manage every interaction between every person and our brand,
Mm,
i.e., every person who buys from us on the online shop, every customer going into one of our wholesale customer accounts, and every customer coming into our own coffee shop at Leeds Dock,
mm,
it might be a slightly different experience because I really struggle not to talk about these things in every conversation.
mm,
But to be honest, we've probably all got to be thankful that I can't do that because it's sometimes coffee for a lot of people. First of all, they're not up for talking before they've had one. You
mm,
really have to be respectful of the fact that a lot of people just want to come in, get a coffee that's great, that's been made attentively with care, and that subliminally, subconsciously kind of feeds across this level of detail that we go to in terms of the extra effort that we're putting in to source amazing coffee, to roast it and to brew it, that kind of hopefully comes through in every sip, and
mm,
even if we can leave with someone saying that coffee was really great, which one was it? And it leads them to maybe looking at buying some for their home, and then they access the website and all the information that we have on the website. We have to, I think in this world of sustainability where there's so much jargon and vocabulary and discussion around it, we're not going to get anywhere unless we can push it out, to more and more people. And I think preaching isn't always the way to do that. I think you have to
mm,
be respectful of the fact that people receive that kind of information differently. Some
mm,
people, you have to find what's going to make them care about it, what
mm,
aspect of their lives do they kind of value that would genuinely be impacted by climate change or by
mm,
I mean, from our perspective, we do these things because the facts are very clear to us that if we don't, our business won't survive in the years to come. Coffee producing areas are top of the list with regards to climate change impact, and it's already happening. It's been happening for the past 5-10 years. We're
mm,
having increased landslides, flooding, droughts. The harvest seasons are shifting, and what that's creating, the social impact of that. You have an aging population of coffee farmers whose average age is between 55 to 57.
yeah, right.
Young people are just not staying in farming coffee because it is simply far too volatile environmentally and also economically. The main commercial system used to buy coffee is simply not delivering a price that's covering people's cost of production, and
Mm,
you kind of have to ask yourself, would you stay in that business? That makes no sense, absolutely no sense, when you're just growing debt year on year. And I
yeah,
think that's kind of the realization that we've had because of how we got into coffee and because of the continued trips that we make each year to visit our producers and have these kinds of conversations. We
mm,
understand that if we don't operate in this manner, we quite simply won't be around in the next 20 years, and you won't be able to get great coffee because it just won't exist. So I
yeah,
think the marketing side of what we do is absolutely crucial, just because from an education perspective.
mm,
Um, but I think this is how I would like to think the way that we run our business is how all businesses need to be run in 2020, where it's not just done to market and to be able to tell everybody about it, but that it's actually a really authentic part to the core culture of the business, you know, because that's ultimately how it maintains and how it makes impact, I think, going forwards.
Yeah, no, fascinating. And as you say, that I think when you've got that kind of global perspective as well, it really hits home, doesn't it? That, you know, the things that we talk about that may sometimes seem in the future, actually, they're having an impact on people's lives right now, aren't they? And, you know, and are in some ways in ours as well. So, as I say, I can see there's been a hive of activity behind you as well, so there's plenty kind of going on. So I'll round things up kind of now, but I mean, just to kind of round up, really. I mean, I think one of the things that you've talked about is I think people can see the kind of the commitment to quality that you've got, but also in terms of buying from you, you know, the impact that has, particularly on the kind of coffee farmers that you work with. I think it is something that, you know, people can make a difference in terms of where they buy, you know, the coffee or whatever. So could you just remind people the ways that they can buy from you, basically?
Absolutely, with pleasure. You can buy directly from our website, which is www.northstarroast.com, and on there you'll find our entire range of seasonal coffees that are just from new crop harvests around the world. So we have loads of information on there. If you're new to coffee, if it's a lockdown habit that you've got into and you want to learn more about it, even if you don't want to buy any coffee, the website has so many resources on brewing, you know, different ways of getting flavor out of the coffee, and all about, you know, the coffee supply chain and what we do. There's lots and lots of kind of resource on the website. You can also visit us in our coffee shop at Leeds Dock, where you can always taste 2 different coffees that we have on espresso. So if you're interested just to understand, you know, how coffee can taste differently because of where it's grown, a bit like wine, you can kind of always try a good selection down at our own coffee shop on both espresso and filter, and you can buy the retail bags from there. And then finally, we have a stockist map on our website which shows sort of wholesale stockists which might be located close nearby to you. We supply lots and lots of companies across the Leeds region, so in you know, in the kind of districts slightly outside of the city centre as well, in North Leeds, Horsforth and Ilkley. So you'll never be too far away, I don't think, from some North Star beans, you know, and any one of those wholesale customers, they are contributing to the same supply chain and in the way that you would if you were to buy directly from us.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Holes, thank you very much for your time today. I really enjoyed the conversation. And just to remind people, we'll put all the links to more information about North Star kind of below this post on Facebook and on YouTube. And also let's say thank you to people for watching. We've actually got another Lunchtime Live tomorrow, and we're not far from you, Holes. We're down at Situ, you know, the Climate Innovation District. So it's quite an interesting one, looking at sustainability in terms of the homes we build and that kind of thing. So yeah, thank you very much again, and I'll no doubt see you soon.
Yeah, love to.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Oz.
Bye.
See ya.